Oregon Ducks travel to the Penn State Nittany Lions in perhaps the game of the year, and from my personal standpoint, the most anticipated game yet this season, this Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. 4:30 p.m. Pacific Time is what the kickoff will be for Oregon folks and the Oregon Ducks, as they're traveling multiple time zones, multiple hundreds, thousands of miles, all the way out to Penn State, all the way out to eastern Pennsylvania. Will be a really calm, cool 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 8-mile-per-hour winds. I think that's pretty wonderful weather for kickoff. Penn State's favored by 3.5 points right now. And it's so interesting how both of these teams, along with Ohio State, are top 3 in odds to win the national title. Before we resume this segment, some great and free ways to support this channel are liking the video, watching it all the way through, commenting your thoughts down below. I'd love to hear your analysis, sharing the video, subscribing to the channel, and also hitting the notification bell. That way you can get notified when we go live or release new content. And don't just hit the notification bell for the channel. That's very helpful. But what's also helpful and free and useful to you, if you are a diehard fan of a specific team and want to get notifications whenever I make content about a specific team, not just my content in general, well, we have playlists for every Power 4 college football team, so the notification bell on any of those playlists you are interested in. If you want to support the channel financially, there are ways to do so in the description, and you can sign up as a paid member. You can go to FanDuel right now and just click on their national championship odds, and it'll pop up that the top 3 teams in the Big Ten are viewed as the top 3 national title contenders. Ohio State at plus 550, Penn State and Oregon tied at plus 650. You look at conference winners in the Big Ten, Ohio State at plus 210 to win the Big Ten, Penn State at plus 260, Oregon at plus 280. These teams I thought were both underrated in the preseason. I thought that a lot of people were selling too much on Oregon, viewing them as a team that was somehow incapable of reloading, yet Ohio State and Texas and Georgia could just casually cock the shotgun and go right at it again. And for Oregon, for whatever reason, it would take some time. And I understood the segment, and I actually had them rated in the bottom half of that group of 4, but not more than a point or a tenth or half or some type of fraction of a point further away from any of those teams. Really, I didn't. The talent was evidently there. I thought the staff was there. The culture was there. Depth was a little bit concerning. It's part of the reason I thought they would start off slower than they did, and their start has impressed me. But I always thought by season's end, or some point, either by this game or after this game, they would be ready to compete at the highest level. And we've seen it. The efficiency metrics have Oregon pegged as the number 1 team in America. It's why FPI right now, ESPN's FPI, has them ranked the number 1 team in America. You go to the game on paper, their net statistics, their adjusted expected points added per play, which accounts for home field advantage, quality of opponent, and garbage time in FBS versus FBS games, has Oregon as the number 1 team as well, tied with USC, plus 0.53 adjusted expected points added per play. Penn State's 7th, Indiana is 6th, Ohio State's 12th, Washington's 5th. Some of these things are very fluky or a little bit interesting or weird or defy what your eyes or brain or preseason research may tell you, but the inventors of these efficiency metrics, people much smarter than myself, will tell you that these things will sort themselves out throughout the season. Oregon, per FPI's efficiency, has a 97.2 overall efficiency rating with the number 1 offense by a comfortable margin, 14th defense, 127th special teams unit, and they're first in FPI by a whole point and a fifth over Ohio State, who's the second best team. So Oregon, they've started off fast. I think my take on them being underrated has aged incredibly well. People like Phil Steele had them outside the top 10 for whatever reason, and others had them similarly outside of the top 10. I had Oregon preseason top 5, top 6, kind of in that fifth, sixth, and at sometimes fourth spot, kind of backing back and forth or going back and forth between those. For Penn State has had a slower start to the season, but they are 10th in FPI. In ESPN's efficiency metrics, Penn State is all the way down at 37th right now. Number 1 special teams, 12th defense, 77th offense. I have to tell you guys, there's no way that offense is 77th best in America. There is no way it's that bad. When you look at some of the advanced metrics, so adjusted expected points added per play, again, Penn State's 7th there. We already talked about Oregon as first. Penn State with a plus 0.39 adjusted EPA per play. You look at their defense, they're 5th in adjusted EPA per play. And you look at Penn State's offense, and the Nittany Lion offense is actually still fairly high, 36th in adjusted EPA per play with a plus 0.08 offensively. Landon Tengwall pointed out accurately on Twitter, and it's something that caused me to adjust how I was phrasing things, that you can't hide half the playbook. And that's true. You can't. I imagine Penn State's offense would look much worse if they were hiding half the playbook. You can't do that. But I do believe that Penn State has been saving things for this game and treating their approach to this game differently than Oregon, in part because these teams are different. And this is where I think really it's important to really get into the meat and potatoes of this matchup, in the sense that these are two elite teams, and yet I think there are some key differences within these teams. One key difference is seniority. You look at Oregon, and Oregon is a fantastic team, fantastic program. I think there is a realistic chance Oregon is the best team in America. As of right now, if we were only going off of this year, I'm not smarter than the people who make the advanced analytics. So I would say, if we're only looking at this year, yeah, Penn State or Oregon are probably, gosh, I already teased it. Yeah, you guys already probably know I think of Penn State as the best team in the nation still. But if you're just going off of the current analytics, not any preseason research, I'm still holding on to actually quite a bit of that for both of these teams since they haven't played any elite competition. Oregon, through 4 games, and only using that data, is the number 1 team in America. Dante Moore looks like an NFL quarterback. They've impressed me a ton offensively, and I think their secondary is better. I think it's more athletic. I think this overall team sort of is tagged along with that secondary, in the sense that this team is a higher ceiling than last year's team, but I don't know what its floor is. I don't know how it will perform in big games. There are still things about Oregon that we just don't know. For Penn State, I feel as if, just based on preseason research and even how this team is clearly playing their C game or worse, and yet they're still dominating inferior competition, I think in a way that last year's team didn't when they were playing C or worse games. I think it's clear that Penn State is better. The question is, how much higher is the ceiling than last season? Penn State under Franklin recently has always had a high floor. They need that ceiling and their average play to be raised in order to win the national title, on top of the Big Ten, winning a game like this, which they've struggled to do so, and beating Ohio State. But the point about seniority that I really wanted to make here is that you look at Penn State's depth chart, and their wide receivers starting, all seniors, even Devontae Ross, who him and Liam Clifford have been sharing time at wide receiver Z. I would expect Ross to start in this game. He's also a senior. You look at the offensive line, 3 starting seniors, 1 redshirt junior, another redshirt sophomore. And then the backup center's a redshirt junior, redshirt sophomore's a backup guard, and Cooper Cousins, a true sophomore, is pretty advanced. Khalil Dinkins, starting tight end, is a redshirt senior. Drew Allar, senior. Kaytron Allen and Nicholas Singleton, seniors. Luke Reynolds at tight end, they're one of their rotational guys there, has looked pretty impressive. He's a true sophomore, but like Cooper Cousins, is pretty advanced. Defense, Denai Dennis-Sutton, Zane Durant, Alonzo Ford Jr., Zariah Fisher. All seniors are redshirt seniors. Now, they're 2 deep on D-line is young. That's an area that they identified in the preseason as having some thin depth. but true freshman Chaz Coleman, redshirt sophomore Ty Blanding, redshirt freshman Xavier Gillum, they've all looked good. Same with redshirt freshman Jalen Harvey. Tony Roas and Amari Campbell at linebacker are juniors. A.J. Harris is a junior. Zakee Wheatley's a redshirt senior. Zion Tracy and Davion Collins are juniors. Elliot Washington is a junior. The only really young player in that secondary is Anthony Belgrave Shorter. And I could see it in some games where the angles and tackling and just who he is, he's still clearly a younger player. DB and then the two deep of that D-line are the younger parts of the defense. But their starters are littered with seniors. And Oregon is also a deep team, and they look pretty good. But you look at, say, wide receiver. They have a true freshman, DeCorian Moore, starting. Malik Benson and Gary Bryant Jr. are seniors. Pregnon, World, and Harkey are seniors. Offensive line, the remainder, Lalolu and Uli, are juniors. Sadiq is a junior at tight end. Dante Moore is a redshirt sophomore. Noah Whittington, a redshirt senior. Jaden Lamar is a junior. And much of their depth at wide receiver, like Penn State's, is pretty young. Depth at running back is a little bit younger than Penn State's. And then offensive line, similar age. You look on defense, they're starting redshirt freshman Tiani Gray at nose tackle. Amari Washington, Tatum Tuioti, Matayo Uiagelelei are juniors. Bryce Betcher's a redshirt senior at linebacker. Devin Jackson is a redshirt junior at linebacker. And then you look at secondary, 3 freshmen, 1 true freshman currently is player 1. They're 2 deep there. Outside of Theron Johnson is full of sophomores or redshirt freshmen. Oregon is just a bit younger, really at every position outside of maybe the offensive line. And then when you factor in recruiting, where Oregon's usually ahead of Penn State's actually well in advance of Oregon on the O-line in terms of blue chip ratio. Both are dominant in the advanced metrics and in the margin of victory category. So points per play margin, Oregon with a 0.595, Penn State with a 0.494. Those are elite numbers right there. Obviously, Oregon's offense operating at a higher level than Penn State's offense, 0.735 points per play compared to Penn State's 0.58. That 0.58 for Penn State I actually found pretty impressive. I know there's, I think, a pick 6 included in that, so that's a big play. But still pretty impressive given just how bad Drew Allar has looked, how inconsistent he's looked. And yet they're still scoring points and beating teams by upper 30s, lower 40s, upper 40s. For most of the game against Villanova, or for parts of the game, it felt like they were always winning by 50-plus points. FCS team, yes, but, good teams beat FCS teams by 50 casually. Look at what Oregon did to Montana State. That was a fast start. I think that FPI has punished Penn State just a little bit too much, and I think people might be reading too much into that. As for Oregon, I actually don't think really that people are reading into Oregon's ratings too much. Maybe in some instances, but Oregon they're a monster. They're an efficiency monster. They're clean. They're sharp. They're polished. Dante Moore, I'm going to say right now, is the best quarterback in this game. That's why Oregon has quarterback at X Factor, and Penn State just does not. I think that offensive line is an X factor for both Penn State and Oregon. I think tight end's an X factor for Oregon. Linebacker, I'm going to go with them along with the defensive line for Penn State's defense. And I would also include Matayo Uiagelelei and Tatum Tuioti at defensive end as X factor players for the Nittany Lions and for the Oregon Ducks. I think that both of these teams are some of the best teams in America. And I'm going to make a video on it. Again, make sure you've subscribed and hit that notification bell. I'm going to make a video on it that I think these could be the top 2 teams in America. Could be number 1 versus number 2. So I'm super excited and super pumped for this game. I cannot describe how excited I am for this matchup. I think, again, it could be game of the century. We could get to the national title game and look back on this matchup between the Ducks and the Lions and think, holy cow, this was the national title game. And now we're getting a rematch maybe even a rematch of the rematch. These teams could face off 3 times. That's what I actually had projected in my college football playoff bracket. My final one is that Oregon and Penn State would face off against each other 3 times. But let's get into some of the key storylines here. I think it's critical for Oregon to be able to run the football and pass protect. Stopping the run is important too, but I want to focus on how necessary it is that Oregon is able to move against this Jim Knowles defense. So they got Jim Knowles the first time last year. Oregon did, Dan Lanning did, Will Stein did, and Dillon, Gabriel, Tez Johnson, Evan Stewart. I hope Evan Stewart gets healthy and can have a huge bounce back year next season. They got Knowles, but then Knowles made some adjustments, and in the Rose Bowl rematch, Oregon couldn't do a damn thing until really garbage time, where Ohio State clearly decided, okay, hey, we're up 34-0. We want to get out of here, preserve our depth, preserve our energy for a tough Texas team in the Cotton Bowl, and then hopefully have enough to win the national title and win it pretty convincingly. They could not really pass protect in the Rose Bowl last year, at least long enough for things to develop and Gabriel to be able to hit open receivers. I think a large part of Oregon's inability to pass protect in the Rose Bowl had actually to do with coverage, and Ohio State being so good in coverage, and their defensive line and linebackers also being elite, to the point where the whole unit's elite, guys can't get open, and consequently you're only going to have so much time in the pocket. So even if it is 3 or 4 seconds, which is plenty of time, since nothing can develop downfield, you get a coverage sack. And sometimes they just straight up beat their man too. It was a manhandling of Oregon. That was Jim Knowles' defense, but so was Jim Knowles' defense that also got beat in Autzen last year. So can Oregon find a way to score on Penn State's defense, to run the ball to keep that defense honest, and also can they pass protect? Isaiah World, when you look at Penn State and Oregon's tackles, is actually the worst graded starting tackle right now. And part of it, I believe, is pass protection, and he has had some issues there with the Ducks so far. And this is very early on against inferior opponents. So is that flukish, or will that show up in a big way against Denai Dennis Sutton or Chaz Coleman? And as for Drew Allar, can they step up? Him and Penn State's offense, which has been very underperforming. Do we see them step up and take a step forward in this game against an Oregon defense that I would argue at secondary is more athletic and is better than they were last year? And I don't know if they quite have the defensive line they did last year. I don't think they do on the interior, but defensive end is better, and I think linebacker has totally reloaded. So what does their offense look like? Is it fluid? Is it rusty as it's been in the first 3 games? And then from there, you branch off into some other key factors. Travel, I cannot emphasize enough. Travel combined with the new environment shook Ohio State last year. You could see it. In hindsight with the Rose Bowl, Ohio State, even I think in that matchup, was the better team. But the travel, Oregon's home field advantage, and I think Oregon wanting the game more from a coaching angle. Both teams' players were very intense there. But Oregon being extremely aggressive and going for it on 4th and goal the first time and having an onside kick and doing those things, they wanted that. That staff wanted that. And I think the fight Oregon had along with the home field advantage and travel really shocked Ohio State. Then in the Rose Bowl, when Ohio State was better adjusted, made some adjustments to their scheme, when their depth and talent had survived the regular season, and Oregon's did too, but as you go throughout the year, those things become more noticeable. The difference in talent becomes more noticeable. That's why these teams that end up winning it all may not always look like the best team in America at first, but then as things evolve and they play more games and there's a larger sample, it becomes clear who the contenders and who the pretenders are. And Oregon last year, in terms of being the number 1 team in America, was in fact a pretender. And Ohio State was the real deal, and they showed that in the Rose Bowl. But That didn't take away from Oregon's regular season win. Here, those factors that helped Oregon are fighting against them now. The travel, the environment, the fact, too, that even though Oregon may be the better team in this game, same with Ohio State against Oregon last year, we don't know that. I mean, what if Penn State is the better team on top of having these edges? I think that's why Penn State's a full 3.5-point favorite, is there is debate amongst who's the better team here. It's not consensus, such as the power ratings always having Ohio State ahead of Oregon last year, where Ohio State was viewed by the books as always being the better team. Here, there's debate. There's arguments for Oregon. If you're more of throw all the preseason research out now, you're with Oregon. If you still think preseason research is a huge part of what these teams are currently, not saying that'll always be the case, because after they play a few big games, what is happening here and now is all that will matter. We can agree on that. But if you're more in these teams haven't played anyone yet, so you still got to take stock in who they are from a preseason standpoint, then you're probably with Penn State, or you think these teams are pretty evenly matched, power ratings-wise. And this is where I get into some other factors. So Penn State's rushing attack, quarterback, Allar has only had one designed run. He will be running the ball here. Same with the running backs and offensive line. That's a no-duh. And as for Oregon, we know Dante Moore can run. We know that offensive line can move people. We know they have a deep running back room. Who's stronger in that aspect? Who moves defensive lines further down the field? Who sits defensive linemen down on their butts? Which offensive line does that? Because both have that capability. For receiver, Oregon, I would say right now, has the superior receiver room, including tight end, in terms of your number one guys. I think Moore would be the number one guy on each team. Sadiq would be the number one guy. But Penn State has closed the gap there. Last year, Oregon was definitely better at receiver and a little bit inferior at tight end, but Sadiq was so freakish that you could make the argument, hey, he's pretty close to Tyler Warren in some regards. Now, Penn State's caught up to Oregon at receiver. They don't have a Dante Moore, but they have Trevor Pena. They have Devontae Ross. They have Kyron Hudson. They've made that leap there. Even if you don't believe me, just watch their film at prior schools or in these first few games. You can tell Penn State's better at receiver. And I can also tell that Luke Reynolds and Khalil Dinkins are good enough to put up their own fight against Oregon's linebackers in the same way Oregon's tight ends can against Penn State's linebackers. So tight end and wide receiver separation, who can get behind the defenses more easily? I think there's debate there. Strong debate. Defensive tackle is important. This is a Big Ten game. Interior trench play is going to decide a lot. Penn State historically has not been strong there, and Oregon lost 2 NFL defensive tackles. So which defensive tackles that aren't really well known to the public makes a name for themselves here, if at all? Because both interior offensive lines, love them. Both interior defensive lines, have some questions about one of them. You'll see who that is in the end. And as for edge and linebackers, who tackles better, who gets more pressure, that's going to be a big deal here in this game. It's going to be a huge deal. Who gets more pressure on each quarterback, and which quarterback handles it better? Dante Moore or Drew Allar? Neither have faced a ton of pressure yet this year. This is going to be the best front each offense and offensive line has faced by a mile. We got to get into the prediction for this game. I hate it because I could talk about this game all day, but each thing has to come to an end. Each beautiful thing has to come to an end. We've spent plenty of time on this matchup. So when I turn the page and look at this game and think, okay, who's going to win? Who has the advantages? I honestly lean a bit more towards my preseason research for these two teams and and the matchup for both than I do some other games. Alabama's played Florida State. Wisconsin, I'm not really counting with how bad they look. Georgia's played Tennessee. And even then, I would still look at a lot of preseason research for those two. Because it's week 5. They've only played 4 games. Penn State's only played 3. Georgia and Alabama have only played 3. Oregon's played 4, but like Penn State, they've played nobody who can compete with them. I still think that Penn State is the number 1 team in America. I think Oregon right now is better than I would have thought Oregon to be in the preseason when they played this game. But I still think that Oregon is going to do a really good job, or that Penn State's going to do a really good job limiting Oregon's rushing offense. And I think their rushing offense, the Nittany Lions, will do a good job getting penetration, getting downfield, and at times getting to the second level and higher on this Oregon defense. I think that Penn State will run, at times it will, and I think it'll do a pretty good job making life hell for Oregon running on the ground. The pass game is a little bit different here. I think that Oregon will have some success against Penn State passing the football. I don't think that Penn State will have tremendous success through the air against Oregon. But I think Oregon has, while they have an elite wide receiver 1, an elite tight end 1, Penn State has fantastic linebackers, and A.J. Harris is a really good corner. And Penn State has enough wide receiver production, which they have not had since really 2022, 2021. They have enough of it and enough tight end production, and Allar is going to be well protected enough by those tackles and good enough on his own accord to find guys, whether it's downfield, whether it's in the short or intermediate passing game. Again, Oregon is averaging 8.23 yards per play overall with a 50% success rate. Penn State has a 49.2% success rate, averaging 6.3 yards per play. You look at yards per dropback, Oregon's averaging 10.1. Penn State's just averaging a pretty mediocre 6.9. But Penn State has a 47.8 passing success rate. Oregon is a 53.3. I think Penn State's passing game is successful enough and is also hiding enough wrinkles here. Not half the playbook. Not going that far. That's intellectually dishonest. They're hiding enough wrinkles to where I think they're going to come out and they're going to have enough success, or more than enough success through the air, to really pour it on offensively. Oregon's running for 6.9 yards per attempt, only allowing a 5.8% havoc rate. Havoc rate, by the way, is tackles for loss, interception, forced fumbles, passes defended, and sacks. Penn State's only allowing a 5.4 havoc rate. It's one of the few units, along with Indiana's, that allows and USC's, that allows a lower havoc rate percent than Oregon's. That's because their offensive line is really that good. So quarterback for Penn State, I do have some concerns there. I do think Moore at this point is better than Allar, but we don't know that yet. And that is something that I think people need to come off of a bit. We don't know. It's only through 4 games for Oregon, 3 for Penn State. Drew Allar, as it stands right now with the metrics, is going to be worse than he was in 2023. I don't think that's happening. Dante Moore, I totally believe, is going to be as good as his metrics say. But I think that Penn State is better than the current efficiency metrics suggest. I've not come off of thinking that at the start of the year or the end of the year, they're going to be the number 1 team. Look at their defense, their special teams, the environment. If you want to look at a player-per-player basis, and their strength of schedules are pretty similar, so you can use PFF grades, Penn State's just a little bit better about everywhere, except for quarterback. But everywhere else, they're just a little bit better or can match Oregon. In some spots, like defensive tackle, they're actually significantly better. So give me the team that I think is the better overall roster, who I think is the best coordinator in Jim Knowles, and they're facing the worst coordinator, Andy Kotelnicki and Drew Allar are, in Tosh Lupoi in this matchup. And also, to add a little bit of icing on the cake, Penn State does have more efficient special teams. Number 1 in America, Oregon outside the top 100 per ESPN's efficiency metrics. I think Penn State wins and covers the 3.5-point spread. I thought preseason that Penn State would pretty handily beat Oregon. My bold prediction was they would win by 17, Penn State would, and the counter to that was later in the year when Oregon would be better, they would beat USC by 17 or more. Now I'm kind of thinking that Penn State doesn't win by 17 because Oregon started off faster, and I want to hedge a little bit. I think that Penn State's clearly going to be the better team, but I don't know that for sure, especially with how fast Oregon started off. And I have faith in Oregon. I have faith in Dan Lanning. I think that they are a very good roster, a great team and program. I'm going to go with Penn State by 10 here to win by 10 points. It's probably scoring 30s, maybe 40s. But I'm going to really stick with 30s here because I don't think Oregon is going to lose by more than 2 or 3 scores at the end, and it will take a little bit before Penn State pulls away, I think. Going a little bit conservative with my prediction, I think that this is the hardest game for Oregon and will be their hardest game this season. I think if they come out and win by double digits, as many in fact have suggested on my social media feeds, then they're going 16-0 and winning it all. If Oregon comes in here and burns this place down, they're not losing to Ohio State. They're not losing to Georgia. They're not losing certainly to Penn State in a neutral field rematch. So I think that if Oregon isn't going to win it all here, if you don't think they are going to, then I have a hard time picking them to win this game. This is a very tough test, even if you're not as high on Penn State as I am, and you're higher on Oregon than I am. So I'm going with Penn State to win and cover. Thank you so much for watching this segment on College Football with Sam. Before we close out here, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share this video around, comment your thoughts and analysis down below so I can read them and reply to them if I have the time. Members get priority replies, but I try to reply to everyone. And also hit the notification bell for the channel and also for any team playlists you are interested in. If you want to support the channel financially, you can always super chat me in the comment section, but I prefer that you sign up as a paid member of the Patreon page or as a YouTube member, or that you can purchase some wonderful merchandise to represent us. I'll see you all soon and have a fantastic day.